again to Geeks Not Nerds, the podcast. I'm Captain Logan.
And I'm Dan.
And today we are going to tackle another Marvel Studios film. Today we're going to be doing a commentary podcast on Captain America First Avenger. And before we get started, I want to mention that some people in our last video were leaving comments asking why we are doing these kind of out of order. I guess if we ignore half of them, we're going in order right now. Because we did Thor, and this was the one, of course, that came right after Thor. In fact, in the same summer. And I think it was the same summer.
Yeah, it was. I believe so, yeah.
And people have been asking why we haven't done Iron Man and Incredible Hulk. Eric and I are going to be doing the Iron Man films, and he and I just haven't gotten around to it, and we've got some more Studios films coming out this summer, and I wanted to knock as many of these out as we could before the summer hits, and I'm wanting to get to Avengers, because I really want to do a commentary on Avengers. So anyway, Eric and I are going to do Iron Man and Iron Man 2. Hopefully we'll get those knocked out here pretty soon. And Dan, I think I'm going to ask you to come in for Incredible Hulk. I know we've skipped it.
Yeah, that's a film that I'd be interested in doing a commentary on. Either of the Hulk films, because I like the Hulk a lot.
So anyway, yeah, we're well aware that these have an order, and but they're clearly their own standalone films. They're episodic enough that as long as we do Iron Man and Iron Man 2 not in the wrong order, feel like we're and Avengers at the end of it, I feel like we're kind of okay. So anyway, hopefully folks are okay with that. That's how we're handling it. And if you've never listened to one of these before, and feel free to wait until we've done them in order if you want to do that.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. If it bothers you that much, you can just wait till they're all done and then watch them in order.
But anyway, that's how we're handling it, and if you've never listened to one of these before, what we do is we do a commentary at the same time as we're doing a podcast, and what that means is you can listen to this theoretically without watching the movie with us. Of course, it's a lot more fun to do it that way, but if you're, sitting in your car or at work or something and you're wanting to listen to something, you can certainly do that, and we'll do our very best to give you some context for the scenes that we're talking about in case you're not watching the film. Of course, it's a lot more fun to do it the other way, so if you have your movie with you got your DVD, your Blu-ray, or you're watching it on Netflix, and this one is, at the time of recording this, on Netflix, feel free to rig that up right now, get it to timestamp 0, make sure to get it past all the menus and everything, and hit play whenever I say now. Dan, are you about ready?
I am 100% ready. I got my mouse on the play button right now.
You got your drink ready?
I don't have a drink this time, but...
Oh, wow. Wow, he's gonna have like cotton mouth by the end of the show.
Yeah, well, at least I won't be sick this time. I'll be able to do impressions through the credits if it comes to that.
Oh, fantastic! Right, well, I will hold you to that, Dan. All right, everybody, please press play right now. Dan, how many times have you watched this film?
I've seen it once or twice. I saw it in the theater and haven't seen it many times past. And I might have seen it once after, now that I think about it, but it's not a film that I've made a point of going back to watch all that often. I mean, it's not that I don't like the film, it's just that Captain America is not a character that I'm wholly and utterly invested in. I like him well enough. I'm reading the comic series right now, and it's good, and I like the character, but he's just not, my favorite thing.
I'm the same way. Captain America has never been a huge character for me, but he's also kind of like Iron Man for me, where he's not a character that I think very much to read or watch by himself, but, on a team, like, he makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I agree. I think the types of stories you can tell with the character are very varied, and that's what I think is one of the great things about him, is that he can be like the espionage thing, like Brubaker did with him, or you can just do straight up like wacky Kirby things, like Remender's doing with him now. He's one of those very versatile characters in that way, and I think that's gonna serve him well in the film adaptations, because this film is just sort of a fun period piece, action movie, and then the second one's gonna be supposedly a political spy thriller, so.
That's exciting, yeah. I mean, I think what makes him so versatile, too, is that he's both a soldier and a superhero. You don't have that with a lot of guys.
Right, exactly. And the great thing about him, too, is, like, he's a character that you don't need to be constantly evolving and changing. It's more like how he reacts to the world around him and stuff. You know what I mean? Like, he definitely has a character arc in this film, but
I've always seen Captain America as kind of like this is weird, this is going to be a weird analogy, but in a certain way, he's almost like somebody who comes from another country, moves to another country, lives there for a really long time, but never loses his accent. Captain America is frozen in ice for years and years and years, and it doesn't matter how long, because however you do it, you know, like you can do Captain America 100 years from now. Somehow he's just trapped in ice for that long, you know.
Yeah.
And however you do it, he comes out, and no matter how long he lives in our present day, he's never going to lose his 1945 attitude.
Yeah,
or his 1942 attitude. I mean, he's never going to lose his ideals and what makes him Captain America. And he might get used to the new time he lives in, but like somebody from another country that never loses their accent, he's never going to lose what it is that makes him Captain America.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I think the thing that attracts me to this character, from an interest standpoint, I'm very much a person who's interested in history, and American history specifically, and the culture of the 1940s is such an interesting thing to look at, and the fact that Stan Lee grew up during that time and was working during that time, and then when he brought him back in the 60s eventually after writing him for a few issues in the 40s, it gives great credence and authenticity to the character in the comics, and I think they got that pretty well here. We're going over the scene now where they find him in the ice, and I just have to say I love that they went with that straight up. We talked a little bit about how straight off the page that Marvel Studios has been so far with their films, and I'm very glad that they went with the ice thing as opposed to something else. Something else,
yeah. They're not afraid of it. There may be other ways they could have done it, but they didn't even go there. They just did it straight, and I think it's great that they opened with it because it bookends it, and it puts it squarely in this Marvel's movie universe that we've now already had 4 films in.
Yeah, and there's some little callbacks to Thor in this scene here. I remember seeing him in the theater. I don't remember specifically where they show up in this scene, but there's carvings of the World Tree from the Asgardian lore in this temple here.
I didn't even notice that. Yeah. I mean, in the theater, I was just excited that they had the cosmic cube between the two.
Yeah, exactly.
And I thought it was neat that and there's also talk about the Asgardian gods. In the scene having been involved with the cosmic cube, and it ties these two movies to the hip right away, which was really fun at the time because we know they're all in the same continuity, but these came out the same year, so we just saw Thor.
Yeah, exactly, and we get the introduction of Hugo Weaving here as the Red Skull, and I think it's a really cool choice that they made for this film in not showing the actual Red Skull face for a little while.
Not only do they not show it for a long time, but there's this great scene we'll see a little bit later where we think we're going to see it, and we don't get to see it yet, and we don't even get to see the painting of it that is being painted. And we think they're going to show us the painting. They don't even show us that yet. Boy, it better look good.
Yeah, and I'm glad, too, that they did the Nazi thing with him. He's clearly dressed in a Nazi uniform. We saw the German eagle on his hat there, so we know he's affiliated with the Nazi regime, but he has the Hydra stuff going on here too, and he's has his own agenda and his own plans that are separate from the Third Reich's goals and Hitler's goals, and it's not them shying away from doing Nazis, it's just that the Red Skull is bigger than that. I like that about it,
Yeah, he's trying to take over the Nazi regime. That's how big he is. That's how scary he is.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's also how far-reaching his vision is, which ultimately his hubris is his downfall.
Yeah, exactly. That's one of the things that I really enjoyed about this, because I had seen some of the early production photos, and a lot of people were saying they're gonna have Hydra in the movie as a substitute for Nazis because they just don't want to address that. And I was like, that's sort of a strange thing considering that Nazis are one of the most notorious film villains in history.
Yeah. Why would you do that? Why would you be scared of that?
Yeah.
They didn't do that. Oh, you're right. That is the trick. I guess in the theater I had forgotten that was in Thor.
Yeah. I mean, but just being a Thor guy, I mean, I know you've read much more Thor now that, we've done the Simonson vaults together, and I can see how you wouldn't have picked up on it immediately.
When this came out, I hadn't read any Thor at all.
Right, exactly.
Yep, Dan's been giving me an education.
Education in Thor.
I really like this makeup job on Hugo Weaving here, where you can tell there's something underneath that, and they did a really good job with that. Of course, me and you are going to look at that and go, oh, that's really cool. The Red Skull is underneath that makeup, and your average person might not pick up on it, but it also just makes him look creepier. And it's like, why is his skin kind of sucked in like that? What's going on with him?
Yeah, I agree. I love Hugo Weaving's performance in this film as the Red Skull, and he's come out in interviews saying that despite the fact that he's signed on for multiple films with Marvel Studios, he really doesn't want to come back and play it again.
Which is sad.
Yeah, because I think I don't see any other guy playing him.
I was honestly, this is going to sound awful. I almost kind of hope that they just avoid Red Skull from now on.
Yeah.
Maybe that's a bad thing to say. Maybe there is somebody else. But I thought that was just the right guy for that role.
I agree.
And I was so excited when he got picked. In fact, I wasn't sure about Chris Evans, and of course I ate my hat later because he's great. But at first, all I had ever seen Chris Evans do was sarcastic, jokey kind of roles. And
I agree. I was sort of in the same camp as you, because Captain America is the polar opposite of that. You don't want him to be acting like Spider-Man or Johnny Storm.
Yeah, and I didn't know if he could pull it off. But then I heard Hugo Weaving, and I was like, well, they at least got that right. Maybe this movie's going to be amazing.
Yeah.
And on the whole, and this is just what I remember of this. Again, I haven't seen this a lot, so we'll see if my opinion is the same when we get to the end of this. But on the whole, Hugo Weaving was definitely the right pick for Red Skull. Ultimately, I was more impressed with Chris Evans.
I was too, because I think I was a little bit more surprised by him than I was by Hugo Weaving. I expected a good performance out of him.
And I felt like they were so careful not to have Red Skull permeate this to the point where it would be silly that he almost doesn't get enough to do. And it's a tough balancing act, because I like that I like it when they make you wait for a villain. I felt like Dark Knight did a really good job with that with the Joker, where some people say, oh, that's Joker the movie, but I feel like a lot of that's advertising. If you actually really look at that movie closely, he doesn't have a ton of screen time. And they do a really good job of making you wait to get to see him. They do the same thing with Red Skull here, but I feel like maybe they make you wait too much and he's not on screen enough.
I can see where you're coming from with that, yeah. I think the reason it worked so people may have felt like Dark Knight was Joker the movie was that, like, even though Joker wasn't on screen, his presence was felt throughout the film everywhere. Like, every action hinged on what the Joker was doing, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and I think the idea is kind of supposed to be that here with Red Skull, with Hydra, and the whole you cut one head off and two more pop up. But I'm not sure I feel Red Skull's presence throughout this film.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think it works as well as it did in Dark Knight.
Tough balance.
Yeah.
All this stuff right here, by the way, looks really, really, really good.
That's what I was gonna say. Yeah, like I feel like this is 1940s America right now, and not even like. It almost has that, like, over-the-top 40s thing about it, which I don't mind because it's a comic book movie, Yeah. I kind of wanted that feel from this. I wanted this sort of really optimistic 1940s America look for this, because that's what Captain America's supposed to come from, at least ideologically, and, like, putting him in that world, gives more credence to him being like that as a person.
I think it also makes you feel like you're getting it from his perspective. This is the way he looks at the world, and even as he's getting beaten up and stuff, I mean, like, you're not seeing that perfect 1940s America, because we just saw Steve Rogers get beat up in the back of an alley.
Right.
But,
yeah, for sure.
But you're also, the color scheme and the visual texture of this of these scenes are all kind of from Steve Rogers' perspective. There aren't very many scenes that he's not in.
Yeah, exactly.
That's important.
I wanted to talk a little bit about Bucky while we have him on screen here, because he's going to be majorly important in the second film.
Yeah, and I'm not sure they set that up quite right.
I am inclined to agree with you on that, having only seen the film a couple times. I don't think their relationship was played up enough in here that I buy the emotional weight that it's going to have for Steve. But then again, they did mention they were childhood friends, and he did just save him from getting beaten up in an alley. So we'll have to see how I feel about it, with the rest of the film moving forward. Here's a nice connection to Iron Man too with Tony's dad. Just cool.
Yeah, and I think he does a fantastic job. This also, connects this up to Iron Man 2 because we've got that. What's it called? I don't know why I can't think of the name of it. The expo, the Stark Expo.
Oh, the World's Fair.
And yeah.
This is very cool that he's building a hovering thing where Tony, later on will invent the repulsors that will allow him to fly.
Yeah, and then it doesn't quite work.
Yeah. I really buy that this guy would father Tony Stark too.
Me too. Yeah, and I feel like this film does a really good job of connecting all this stuff together. For Avengers, but it doesn't feel like it's pushing Avengers too hard on us like I kind of felt like Iron Man 2 did when I first saw it. I backed off on that position a little bit, having seen Avengers now. Mm-hmm. Just because now that it's all kind of together, I kind of more see where they were going with it, and it wasn't so gimmicky as much as setting up things that we kind of needed, for the most part. But when I talk about Iron Man 2 with Eric, I'll touch on more of that. One thing I wonder though is if this movie needed the word Avenger in the title.
I'm not sure that it did. I know probably why they put it in the title, in that this is a movie that was released internationally. You know what I'm saying? I heard a lot of things people were saying that, like, this movie being released in other countries, the name was changed to just the First Avenger because they wanted to avoid, having it be perceived as a propaganda thing of, like, American nationalism and stuff.
That's a good point.
Which it's such a difficult thing with Captain America because that's what he was when he was created in the first place.
Well, you're right. That is tough, and so that was smart marketing. At the same time, I feel like you could have used another moniker because at least over here, what it feels like, and again, this is partly because of some of the flack Iron Man 2 got for. Some of the flack Iron Man 2 got for this. Is that by putting Avenger in the title, it feels like you're kind of just advertising a movie you haven't made yet.
Yeah,
and what I feel like there were other things you could have called it. And again, I'm not complaining that hard. It's not a big deal. It's a fine title. It's better than X-Men Origins Wolverine, okay? But I mean, really, it's okay. You could have just called that Wolverine, and we would have all been fine. Whatever. If they're gonna do the Wolverine, it's gonna make it. It's gonna be okay.
Yeah.
I would have called this Sentinel of Liberty.
That would have been great.
Just want to throw that out there. But that's what I think it should have been called.
That would have been cool, or they call him the Winged Avenger sometime. That's got the same problem. But see, one of the things that I always thought was weird about the first Avenger thing was, like, technically, if you want to talk about people that are actually on the Avengers team, Thor has been around for a lot longer. He just hasn't had his character arc where he, like, would be fit to be an Avenger yet.
Yeah, and the thing is, the title, and you know how I am being a title guy, he doesn't play into the movie at all. He doesn't really avenge anything. Or does.
Yeah, for sure.
You know?
I love this Doctor, by the way.
Yeah, I think he does a great job.
He's one of the most human characters in the film. Not that there's characters in the film that are really focused on that aren't human, but, like, just the way he plays it. I think he eats up pretty much all the screen time he has. He has great chemistry with Chris Evans too, especially in that scene where they have a drink together later on.
I was going to mention that scene. Something that's funny about that scene is that, if I remember right, he won't let Steve Rogers drink. And if you'll recall in the comics, and I don't think they really play this up much in the movie, but Captain America can't be affected by liquor. So the night before he becomes Captain America, he can't have liquor, and he'll discover later that liquor will never affect him again.
Yeah, they do that. They do have that scene in the movie after. Is that after Bucky passes away, or supposedly when he loses him?
Oh, do they actually deal with it?
Yeah, I think they do it in the movie.
Wow. I don't remember that. Like I said, I'm rusty on this. What qualifies Dan and I to do this commentary is that we talk about superheroes a lot. That's our qualifications for doing this movie. If you listen to somebody else's commentary, you'll probably learn more. What you'll hear from us is, oh look, the Paramount logo should be right there, Dan. What you'll learn from us is that we're piecing it together as we're going along.
Sort of like Steve Rogers, so you get to see things from his perspective.
His face is right in my face.
I love that the Red Skull has a mountain base. That's like Bond villain.
He thinks he's a 007 villain right now.
Yeah. And this guy right here is that supposed to be Aram Zola?
Is it?
I think so.
Yeah,
I think they name drop him later on. And
no, you're right. You're right. That is who that's supposed to be. Because I saw it just now in the subtitles.
Very cool. Setting up villains that in this time period that we're not going to see till later on. And it's interesting how they deal with Red Skull later on. He gets taken out by the Cosmic Cube. I know Marvel Studios probably had plans for him in the Cube later, but man.
Oh, I figured that too. When they did it that way in the theater, I remember thinking, oh, he's inside that cube.
Yeah.
Somehow. He's in there.
It's interesting too, Aram Zola has his face in the comics is like a bluish purple most of the time. I wonder if they were to do him on screen, if they connect his head being in his stomach thing to the cube in any capacity. Because if they do Aram Zola in this universe, I would not be surprised if they just straight up do, chest face thing.
Oh, I think they should go that far, yeah. I think Marvel Studios has been doing a pretty good job of kind of planting some villains like that, and whether or not they use them, it's kind of fun for fans, because they don't just kind of drop them in. It's not I don't want to get in trouble when I say this, but it's not that Star Wars thing where you just put a character on screen and give them nothing to do, but then people become fans of them.
Yeah.
And that's not what really happens. What really happens, of course, is you get expanded universe and then people get to know those characters. But if you're like me and you just watch the movies, you're sort of like, well, who's that guy? They don't do that in these movies. They'll have the leader, the guy who would become the leader in Incredible Hulk. He's a character. Like, he's got interesting things to do. And if they never use him again, if they never actually make him become the leader, that's kind of a nice little name drop thing, but then he also is a character in that movie.
And same thing with Aram Zola here. Like, he has not a ton to do, but he works for the Red Skull here, and he has, he's not just standing around, he's got dialogue, all sorts of things. And you're right, I appreciate that about him. The difference with the Star Wars thing being that this is a pre-existing thing.
Yeah.
Where you have characters that you can adapt and bring in. With Star Wars, it was just like, for marketing reasons, we make an action figure out of everybody.
Yeah. No, that was a terrible example. It was just the first thing I thought of. How surprised were you that Tommy Lee Jones signed on to do this movie?
Very surprised, considering I didn't know his attitude towards comic books until I had watched the commentary that you and Manos did on Batman Forever, where you mentioned that he thought it was just sort of a silly thing. I think it has everything to do with the role he had in the film as a military commander in World War II.
And now that he's done a couple comic book movies, I think he's just kind of warmed up to it a little bit.
Yeah. And here he's like, the performance is serious, but it's almost like over the top military commander serious, to where it has levity, you know what I mean? Like later on, we'll see him do some things where, like, he's so like on the nose and serious about everything. It's kind of funny.
He gets a lot more to do in this movie than I expected when I saw him in the trailers.
Me too.
When I saw Tommy Lee Jones, I was like, I mean, he's a lot older now. I was just sort of thinking he's gonna be in like 3 scenes, and they put him in the trailer because he's Tommy Lee Jones, and he's a major secondary character. Yeah,
we had mentioned before about how good Marvel is with casting, and like This is another movie where, like, they just got the casting 100% right with pretty much everybody.
I think so too. There's nobody I can think of that they should have cast different.
Yeah, and they play to their strengths too. Like you had mentioned Tommy Lee Jones. You didn't think he was going to get a lot of screen time, and like, you know, I think maybe that guy didn't have as big of a role in the script before they cast Tommy Lee Jones. Who knows?
Maybe so. I don't know. I mean, clearly they were trying to use him for all he was worth. It's like, we got Tommy Lee Jones. We better make the best of that.
Yeah, exactly. I love this scene with the flag. Just Steve Rogers outwitting everybody. Tells you a lot about the character in such a simple little scene, you know?
This scene and then the thing with the grenade is what made me think they've got this character. They've nailed it.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
The grenade thing that we'll get here in a little bit is vintage Captain America. It's just what he is.
Mm-hmm. Agree.
And I don't think this movie would be anything without that.
Let me ask you this: now that we're looking before we get the transformation, how do you think the skinny Steve Rogers thing worked out? A lot of people said it looked kind of freaky, and Chris Evans had too big of a head, but I think it looks fantastic.
I think it looks fantastic. You compare this to other kind of digitally rendered things like that, where you know, they'll change a person to look older or younger. You compare that to like Patrick Stewart and Ian McKellen at the beginning of X3.
Oh,
it looks so much better than that. Yeah, and I mean, and I thought that looked pretty cool when it was out, but we've come a little farther. And
yeah, exactly.
And yeah, it didn't take me out at all, Dan. I was really impressed with it in the theater. And if you really stare at it closely, you can tell it's a digital effect. How else would you do it? But it didn't take me out. I think it was really well integrated.
I agree, and I think it's so much better of a choice than casting a smaller actor and not having Chris Evans able to give the performance of Steve Rogers at this point in his life. I think it would have been too jarring.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And Chris Evans, I had heard in interviews, was a little bit apprehensive about playing this because he didn't know that if he was going to be able to get big enough. Like, working out in such a rigorous schedule isn't something he likes to do. And he just didn't know if he'd be able to handle the fame that comes with playing such an iconic character. Where, like, Johnny Storm is, like, you know, a big character, but he's not Captain America.
He's not Captain America. And he's part of the larger team. Captain America's the character.
Yeah, exactly.
He's the protagonist. You have to wonder if you're somebody like Chris Evans too, and you've never had to bulk up like that. If you have the right body type, if you're capable of it.
Exactly. Yeah, because some people, their bodies just aren't made to be that big.
In fact, most people's bodies aren't made to be that big. And you know, like if you're somebody like me, I tell you right now, if I got cast for that role, I couldn't bulk up like that. Wouldn't matter how hard it wouldn't matter how hard I tried. I might be able to get a little close if you gave me, you know, a year, but I couldn't get to where he's at.
No, definitely
so
not.
He got really lucky.
He did.
Some of that is definitely genetics.
Oh yeah, for sure. He did get very lucky, and I think the physique that he pulled off for this movie is like perfect size-wise, what I would think a live-action Captain America would look like.
And I like that he's not too buff. I'm glad they didn't go with somebody, like, giant.
Yeah, it's awesome that, like, he's big, but he's not Chris Hemsworth big. Which is good, because you want Thor to look bigger and more powerful than everybody else on the team. In terms of, like, just the normal-looking human people. Obviously, the Hulk's gonna look bigger, but...
I should mention that in this little montage here, we actually saw a couple swastikas. They're not shying away from it.
Right, exactly.
They didn't show you any of that in the trailers. I kind of think maybe they ought to have just to get some credibility.
Yeah.
Because I think people were worried about it, and in all of those, like you were talking about earlier, in all those early shots we were getting of Schmidt, you didn't see any swastikas.
No, you didn't, and that's such a thing that people were worried about with the Red Skull, because like if you detach him from the Nazi thing, it makes him a completely different character, and I could see how people would have been worried. One of the things that's going on in this montage here we get is the origin of the Red Skull, which is different from the original Red Skull thing, from what I remember, in that I don't think he was a super soldier in the comics, was he? I thought he was just a scary dude in a red mask, and that's why he wanted the Cosmic Cube, because he wanted power.
No, I thought he had tried. I thought that was right. I thought he had tried to use the super soldier formula on himself, and it didn't work.
Oh, okay.
I'm going to look it up and make sure I'm right about that.
I haven't questioned it, but Captain America stuff, so I just wasn't sure.
Oh well, the thing you got to realize though is that the 40 stuff doesn't count in Marvel. They did change it.
Oh, okay.
You see what I'm saying? Marvel, if I'm right about this, and I'm a little rusty on my history on Captain America, but what I've read, I think, is that Captain America was they had license to kind of change what they wanted to change when they went to when they brought him back in Marvel out of Timely. So just because it's in Timely in the 40s doesn't mean that it's Marvel canon.
Yeah, I just they kept the Bucky thing from the Timely stuff and Namor and the original Human Torch. So I just figured, having not read that stuff, they had kept all of it, but I'm not sure.
I'm sure somebody can tell us.
has a huge reverence for this character because this was the first writing gig he ever got.
Oh yeah.
He was the guy that coined the shield throwing thing as well. Before that, Captain America didn't throw a shield and have it bounce off things. That was Stan Lee's idea.
You are right that he wore a mask first.
The Red Skull?
Yeah, I'm still reading to see if they did the whole super soldier thing.
Oh, I see.
But he did wear a mask first.
It's really unfortunate that Jack Kirby didn't live to see this movie made, because this Captain America is his baby. It would have been very cool to have a Jack Kirby cameo in this movie.
I'm not finding it right away. We'll have to check a little bit later.
No,
but I feel a bit remiss not knowing that. But
yeah. And here's the scene
he calls him Dr. Zoller. I just love this scene. Yeah, this is classic stuff. I mean, like this is just how you do a villain like this.
Yeah, it's very Bond villain-esque. You just see him in the shadows. It's like how you would see scenes of Blofeld just stroking his cat, but you never saw his face in some of the early Bond films where they were setting him up before you actually get to see him.
There's just a good sense of escalation.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And again, it's a little over the top, but it works.
Yeah,
you want that kind of thing. I think that you get enough emotional resonance with a lot of the really important scenes that you're able to juxtapose it with that, and it's almost, instead of coming out and doing just straight comedy, I feel like those kinds of things kind of like give it the levity that just straight up comedy would otherwise give it, if that makes any sense. Not that there isn't just some straight comedy in this movie, but I feel like there's stuff like that it's not laugh out loud funny, but it's funny.
Yeah, it's
in its way, it's charming more than it's funny.
Yeah, exactly. And it's credible because the like we were saying, the aesthetic that they're creating here with this 1940s America, it's believable that something like that would be there, within this world that they've created. I really like this scene between Steve and Sharon Carter here, or Peggy Carter. Sharon Carter's the one later on in the present, but I really like that they set their relationship up before he has the transformation. Adds a lot of authenticity to it, that she sees something in him before he gets the perfect male body, Because even if they had played it right after he transformed, it might have come off as a little shallow,
Yeah, I agree with you.
I like her as well in this role. I think she's a pretty good actress. I'm not really familiar with her, but
there are a lot of people in this movie that I just didn't know from anything else.
Yeah.
Yeah, Haley Atwell's not really anybody I know from anything else.
And here we have this sort of like espionage secret agent thing going on, which is very cool and reflective of, the tone they're going to be going with the future films. Marvel Studios has so much foresight with these movies.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, you always got to wonder how much they've got planned ahead and how they plan for things not knowing exactly what films they're going to make. That's something that's kind of interesting.
It is really interesting.
Where do they say, okay, we've got to make sure that this thing happens someplace, and we'll find a place to put it, but we don't really know what movies we're going to make. I mean, like they don't greenlight these things until a couple years before they come out. So, they just greenlit Ant-Man. For a long time, we thought that was going to be part of the second wave. It's going to be part of the third wave now. And what have they decided are going to go in that movie, foresight-wise, for what they want to put later? I don't know how they organize this stuff. Now, we know that there have been some things already in some of these movies, a few little minor things, that they've kind of abandoned.
Well, I mean, Incredible Hulk is like the movie that, almost doesn't even count.
Yeah, you could pretty much just plain up skip it. Because they sort of revamped that character again when they got to Avengers. I think third time's the charm there. I don't think they'll have to do that again.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see if they end up doing a solo Hulk film with Ruffalo or not, whether they go ahead with it. Because they know people want to see it, but like I had mentioned this to you, I think, in a video recently. Joss Whedon had a quote saying that it's such a difficult thing to nail when you have to spend the entire movie with a character trying to prevent the thing people are coming to see from happening.
And I like that quote, and he's right about it. At the same time, all you need is the right writer, because that's what the TV show was all about.
It was, and it was a fantastic show. And that's what the comics were about for a lot of the time.
They only ever, it was a formulaic thing, but I mean, like, they only ever had him turn into the Hulk once or twice in each episode.
Right, exactly.
And yeah, you're right. I mean, people come to see those scenes, so you make those scenes amazing, and then for the rest of the time, you make us really invested in the human character. And that doesn't always, I mean, and that's difficult, and I'm not sure that, I think that Bruce Banner had a hard time connecting with people with both of those films, with both Hulk and Incredible Hulk, in different ways.
I agree.
But I felt like people really liked Ruffalo in Avengers before they finally saw the Hulk.
Yeah, and I think that has everything to do with how Whedon wrote the character.
And the casting helped a lot, too.
Oh, yeah, for sure, the way Ruffalo played it. It's almost like, I don't know that we have anybody. I mean, Marvel Studios could probably find a guy to write a Hulk movie that would work, other than Joss Whedon, but that's the guy who I'd want to write that movie.
Yeah, me too. You could say that about a lot of these characters now, though, just because we just saw a movie where he did them all really well.
Yeah, for sure. But, like, he's, like, Captain America with this movie, we had other people working on it. I mean, he obviously, I think this was late enough in the Marvel Studios things before Avengers that he got to see everything and sort of not okay it, but make sure that, Avengers was consistent with this and Thor and things like that.
Yeah, that's right.
He's the only one that's gotten it right, out of all of the, the Hulk's been in 3 major live-action films now. It's gotten to the point where, like, we've had 2 misses and 1 hit. If there's another miss, we might not get another Hulk movie ever again. Or at least for a while.
This is one of those superhero movies where there is a story in the origin and you really want to see it.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Same thing with Thor. I think Thor and Captain America are 2 origin stories you need to tell to have, I mean, not just the physical transformation with Cap, but it's a character thing where you need to get them to a place where, in Avengers they make sense. One
of the examples I like to use with something like this is if a character's sole motivation, or one of their major motivations, I should say, is the death of a loved one, I need to see them with that loved one before they die so I understand why that was such a big deal to them.
I agree.
And I feel like a lot of people get the sense that, well, everybody is going to be really upset if their mom dies or if their spouse dies or something like that happens. And of course they will. But what's important is that I see how a particular person handles it a particular way, what separates them from other people. And so by the same token, you need to see what Steve Rogers is like before he's Captain America so you can appreciate him as Captain America.
Yeah, and this is almost like, now that I'm thinking about it, we had talked a bit about how Captain America, like Superman, is one of those characters that you don't necessarily need him to be changing all the time. It's almost like he's the shining beacon of hope that's never changing, and that's what you like about him. He's consistent. He's something to aspire to. And it's sort of like the reverse of the Thor origin story, where you have a bad guy, well, not a bad guy, but an arrogant, like a bratty kid turned into, a responsible man. And Captain America it's not just the physical changing, but it's like realizing your own potential.
It's not about him figuring out his faults. It's about him figuring out that he actually has something to contribute.
Exactly, yeah.
He thinks that he's all fault, and he realizes that there's something else there. And what I've always really respected about Captain America is that he's a character that lives as if the world is as it should be, and kind of just expects that it will be that way. And
he gives everyone the benefit of the doubt, yeah.
He gives everybody the benefit of the doubt, and he realizes, unfortunately, that the world isn't that way, and that he has a responsibility to it because he's kind of got it right. And that's not an arrogant thing, really, because his philosophy is infectious, and when people come to understand it, they wish they were that way. Exactly,
yeah. That's exactly what they got right in this film, too, I think.
Oh, yeah, 100%. What I love about him is that's what keeps him from losing, and that's the reason they pick him, that's the reason that doctor picks him, that he does not lose what makes him unique when he becomes Captain America.
Yeah,
and so he's able to remember what it was like being that weakling, and he doesn't lose all of that just because now he's stronger than everyone else.
Yeah, I agree. I loved that quote. I'm sort of paraphrasing here, but it was basically like, to responsibly use power, you almost have to be a weak man first, so you can appreciate what that means. And that's what we were talking about a little bit with Thor, where he's a guy who was born into power and didn't really, know how to use it properly. And Captain America was a guy born with, like, nothing, and, he gets that power and instantly knows what to do with it.
Yeah, and he can relate to all these other people that don't have that power. I like that they're playing up, because he just became a super soldier, I like how in this action scene, they're playing up how he doesn't know his own strength, and he's gonna be clumsy.
Agreed, yeah.
It would have been really easy for them to forget that and have him do a bunch of stuff that he should not know how to do right now.
Yeah, like when, we saw him sort of like starting out running slow, like, he doesn't realize that his muscles can move that fast at first, and he sort of speeds up, which was...
Yeah, and he'll trip over things because he just doesn't know his own speed and his own strength, and he'll crash into windows. I mean, I love how he busts up the flower shop.
Yeah, and then he apologizes for it.
Oh yeah, because he's polite. I mean, like, I don't know. Like I said, he's infectious. Like you watch this guy, and like I don't know. Not everybody's like me, but every time I watch somebody like Captain America, like I want to be that guy.
Yeah, and that's the feeling he should instill in you. And Chris Evans plays it so well. You can tell he gets the character, and even if he didn't go back and read the source material, someone who has,
I gotta stop you for a second. It was a good touch that when he picks up that door and uses that as a shield, it has a star on it.
Yeah, I agree. I actually really like this chase scene a lot. Vintage cars are one of my things that I really admire, because I grew up. My dad has always been big into cars, and he's always owned one sports car or another ever since I was little, and seeing all these old cars really struck a chord with me. I thought that was cool.
You must be a couple minutes behind me.
Oh yeah, I guess.
Man, that submarine looks really cool.
Yeah, it does.
I want one of those.
All the hybrid technology looks great in this movie. It looks futuristic, but like old at the same time.
Yeah, it's cool. It's like what, and I love stuff like this, where it's like what they would have thought futuristic was going to be.
Yeah, exactly.
So they look forward 30 years and they're making what they think it'll be. I always love it when you'll see a commercial for a car or something.
Mm-hmm.
People still even do this now, where like, you know, somebody will make something and they'll call it futuristic, and I just always think that's funny. It's like, you know, you look back 20 years and you're like, well, now what you called futuristic looks vintage.
That's very true. Like the way 50s cars were sculpted, that was considered to be like cutting edge at the time, and like, you know, obviously the way cars look now is very different, and they look vintage. I think
well, in the early 2000s, we had all those like square kind of looking cars.
Yeah,
we thought that was the way of the future, and we're not really making them like that anymore.
No, we're going back to a more curvy look.
I used to call those inflatables. I just thought they looked like somebody picked up a balloon and
pumped air into it.
Yeah, exactly.
I like all the people they picked to be just Germans in this movie too, because they look authentically German. Like I don't know what it is about them, like in their facial features and stuff, and the way that their hair is combed and stuff like that.
Yeah, they did a really good job with that. You're right. You know, you mentioned earlier about how over the top and comic book this movie looks. This is a really comic book looking movie.
Yes, it is. And I know they chose Joe Johnston based on a movie I haven't seen, but it is also based on a comic book. It is also a period piece, The Rocketeer. Have you seen
you've never seen The Rocketeer?
No, I have not. I've been meaning to, but
you'll like it. It's great. The Rocketeer has Alan Arkin in it.
Oh, that's awesome.
Which I was remiss in not going back and mentioning when I did The Return of Captain Invincible.
Oh yeah, he was in that too, wasn't he?
Starring Alan Arkin.
He was in a movie recently that just came out too. I think it was that Burt Wonderstone movie.
He was in Argo and he was nominated for it.
Oh wow, that's awesome. I didn't realize that.
But he was also he was also recently in a movie with Christopher Walken, I think.
Oh, well, that's awesome.
I think. Yeah. The guy, what is it? Like, I think Stand Up Guys? Maybe I'm mixing up a couple things, but I think he's in that.
If you were to cast Walken as a Marvel supervillain, who would you cast him as?
Oh, I need a few minutes to think about that. That's great. Well, what would you say? Do you have anything?
I don't know. I'd have to think about it, too. I just thought of that question off the top of my head when you said it. When you said Walken's name.
Yeah, that movie is Stand Up Guys with Alan Arkin, Al Pacino, and Christopher Walken. That just came out recently.
Oh, I'm going to have to see that. Anything with Christopher Walken is going to be somewhat enjoyable just because he's in it.
I like Al Pacino a lot, too.
Yeah, I like Al Pacino, and Alan Arkin's cool, too, but just, you know, Walken's...
That just sounds like three guys you want to put in a movie together.
Right. It's sort of unfortunate that the Captain America movies were starting, you know, the good ones at least, are starting to be made post-Cold War.
That's a good point.
I don't know, like, so many of the cool spy stories that they could have told with this character would have hinged on, like, Cold War ideas and stuff like that, you know? in fighting the Soviets. And a lot of the early Marvel villains were, Russians and Russian stereotypes. So
is this going to get a little bit harder? Yeah, it's weird to bring Captain America into present day, and that's where he starts, because now he's got to... Well, and you can still do interesting things with this idea, and it's been done, where it's like Captain America's used to fighting, a country with a face, and now what we're kind of left with is terrorists, which he's not used to.
Right. Which is sort of like, the idea they played it in Skyfall with James Bond, which is an interesting idea.
It's a great idea. And there was I can't remember what it was, but there was an early 2000s story that I think dealt with Captain America dealing with the war on terror and his perspective on that.
Was that a Brubaker story?
I think it was a Brubaker story, yeah.
Cool.
But I only peripherally know about it. I've never read it.
Oh, okay, yeah. Fair enough. I haven't read it either.
Yeah, we're not the guys to be doing this commentary, but we're doing the best we can. I took my dad to see this movie opening day. My dad is a huge Captain America fan.
Do you like it a lot?
Yeah, he was grinning ear to ear the whole film. This is what he's been waiting for his whole life.
That's great to hear. I know Captain America fans because I went to see the film with some of my friends, and one of them was a Captain America fan. Not a gigantic fan, but he's read some of the comics. He's sort of a casual fan of it. He was very happy, but it's glad to hear that it pleased the hardcore fans too. And here we get the traditional costume, which is very cool.
This was the other scene that really sold me on this movie. This idea that he becomes just a propaganda engine because they don't know what to do with him.
Yeah, and it's
the song and everything. It's so authentic.
Yeah, and it's so reflective of, like we were talking about, how Captain America initially was just a propaganda piece in the first place.
It's really cool how they mix that.
Yeah. I love the old shield too.
Yeah, it's cool.
In fact, they use that.
Chris Evans is doing a great job through this montage, looking like just a working guy,
like he's phoning it in because his heart's not in it.
Yeah, this is not what he wants to do. He doesn't want to be a commercial.
No.
He did this to help.
And it's interesting that he doesn't want to do this, becoming commercial and inspiring people to help with the war effort, but that's what he becomes by doing the things he does during the war anyway, inspiring people, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and he doesn't think about all that. He just thinks about every person is responsible for doing their part, and he just wants to do his part.
Exactly, yeah. I love this where they do him punching Hitler in the face thing from the first cover.
Yeah, it's right out of that cover. Cool. That's great. And you can see how far away his fist is from his face.
Oh, yeah. And one of the cool things about there's the issue right there. That issue actually came out, I think, well before America had entered the war effort, and Jack Kirby and Joe Simon were one of the first people to be like, yeah, this Hitler guy's kind of evil. We should do something about it. When America was sort of practicing isolationism and not wanting to get involved in Europe at all, and all those sorts of things.
And I could have... What's interesting about this is, despite all the super soldier stuff and everything, I could kind of see the U.S. military going this far.
I could too, yeah, especially during this time.
Yeah, but that's what I mean. I mean, during World War II, I could have seen them doing something like this. Casting a guy that looked really good, making him the face of the army. Maybe even taking the idea from comic books. I mean, remember Batman and Robin on U.S. stamps. They were selling bonds.
Yeah, and comic books were actually even being sent to the soldiers on the front lines too. Yeah, everybody read comics back then. It was a big industry. It was only after that whole Frederick Wortham guy came around in the 50s, and had that whole big scare about how they were ruining children and all those sorts of things where they became discouraged, and the industry has never really recovered, unfortunately.
It's never recovered to that point, no. Comics at this time were selling in the top titles were selling in the millions.
Yeah, they were.
And of course, they were also very, very cheap.
Yes, they were.
And they were printed, of course, on very, very cheap paper, and so they could be sold for 15 cents, 10 cents.
Yeah, and it was a completely different thing creatively too. Like, a lot of the people weren't credited; they used pseudonyms. It wasn't the type of thing where we have now, where like you have.
It wasn't about the creators
and all that sort of thing.
If you go back then, and granted, it was mostly kids reading them, but if you go back to that period, because I think there probably was somewhat of a stigma about it, where not that they were necessarily bad for children, but just that they were children's entertainment. You probably didn't see a lot of adults reading them, but you would have never seen anybody back then having the kinds of conversations you and I do about comic books.
No, definitely not.
You wouldn't have seen people talking about the you wouldn't hear them saying the names of the characters, of the creators, and who drew this book, who wrote this book, and.
No, definitely not. Because back then it was just like, how a lot of people who don't really know creators follow comics now. It's just like, I like this character. I'm gonna buy his comic book.
Simpler times, Dan.
Yeah. It makes you long for it, doesn't it?
Maybe a little bit. Well, it makes me long for 20-cent comic books.
Oh, that would be awesome, huh? Where you could, like, your pull list could be, like, 50 books. You spend, like, $20.
You and I'd have a lot more work for us, I'll tell you that much.
I could read Marvel's entire line, you could read DC's entire line. Not that we'd want to, but...
We would do nothing but make videos.
Oh, God.
Just every day we'd be making videos, but they'd all be as long as our normal Friday new acquisition videos.
Oh, man.
You hear Dan and Cap talk about comics for an hour every day.
That would be crazy. See, one of the things that we were mentioning about how comics were selling in the millions too, like they were sold on newsstands and were widely available, and a lot of the reason why these old copies of comics are so expensive now to collectors is because a lot of people use them as toilet paper.
Yeah, they threw them away. They read them once and they tossed them.
Yeah.
And also, even if they didn't take care of them, they didn't survive because they were on such cheap paper.
Right, exactly.
So that stuff would degrade. You would have to keep it in bags. Well, people weren't bagging them; they wouldn't have thought to.
Right. It's like when you get the newest issue of like Rolling Stone. You don't throw that in a bag and board and save it away because it'll be worth money someday.
Yeah, you're not careful about it. And how would you have ever known they would be collectible?
No, you wouldn't.
I think it's fascinating. And I love it when comic book movies like this will make a little statement like that just visually about comic books. And this is one of the perfect movies to actually show comic books.
Yeah, I agree. And it's very evident that Joe Johnston has a reverence for it, just in that he was willing to go that far, Not that he, shoved it in our faces or anything, but he very easily could have shied from that.
He could have, and I don't think it's gratuitous at all. It's one of the few times where it makes perfect sense that you would have a comic book of the title character in his own universe.
Yes, because he's such a propagandist thing at that time.
Oh yeah, sure. It would eat that up. I mean, wouldn't it be more fun to sell comics of a person that actually exists?
Right.
But what's really
jacket that he has on in the Jeep, is that the one that he wears at the end of the Avengers when he's on the motorcycle?
I think it is. I think you're right.
That's cool.
What I was going to say is what's really interesting about that is those comics would be telling stories as Captain America as an action hero before he becomes an action hero.
Oh yeah, I didn't even think about that. That is interesting.
He hasn't actually done anything yet.
I love how we get all these different incarnations of Captain America's costumes that we've seen in the comics before. Like, this is the World War II costume from the Ultimate Universe. Very cool costume. I like the helmet with the A on it.
These people did their homework, man.
Oh, yeah, for sure. They even had foresight with his jacket. Unlike Wolverine.
There wasn't a lot of foresight with that jacket.
Because, like, he got the jacket, but then lost it by the end of the movie, so you're like, how does he have it at the beginning of X1 again?
One of the things they did with this movie, and I know I was a little bit turned around when we did the commentary on Thor on this, but about this particular thing, but one thing I really appreciated was that they kept this almost entirely period.
Yeah,
I was kind of hoping they would keep entirely on Asgard, and they didn't go that way.
Mm-hmm.
But this was a case where you really needed this time to really flesh this story out. And because the thing is, it would feel so uneven, wouldn't it, if half of this was a period piece and half of it was set in the present?
Oh, I agree. And I think Captain America adjusting to present day is story-wise worthy of its own film. So that, like, you can spend time in this setting. Like, World War II is such a rich setting. I wouldn't have wanted the movie to be set anywhere else entirely.
Dan, it's interesting. I didn't notice this. I always catch something when I look at subtitles that I don't catch just listening to it.
Yeah.
The weapon that he's building, he called the Valkyrie.
Oh, interesting. Like the character from Thor.
Yeah. Well, important to note that whether anybody else realizes it or not, Red Skull knows that Red Skull knows about all this mythology. He knows about Asgard.
That's interesting.
And at the beginning, he talks about Odin's trophy room. He gets all that, and the difference between him and everyone else is he doesn't think it's mythology. He thinks it's real.
Yeah.
And it turns out that it is real.
Yeah. And that is very very indicative of what the Nazis were practicing at the time. There's a lot of stories about how Hitler was into the occult and would try to use magic things to help the troops and things like that.
Red Skull trumps him because he actually finds real magic.
Right, yeah.
What's really interesting is Red Skull goes to a place that Hitler wouldn't have thought to go. He goes north.
Yeah, that is true. I don't think...
Hitler would never have thought of that.
No. Because that's so outside
I'm not going to profess to know all that much about that history any more than anybody else does, but I don't think he was probably practicing occult with anything that has to do with Norse mythology.
Right, I wouldn't imagine so.
But that's such a neat direction to go with that.
It is, and
Stan Lee was great at merging all those things together.
Oh, he was. And it's very cool that we saw him before in the jail, that we saw Dum Dum Dugan and some of the Howling Commandos in this movie too. No, not that they have a ton to do, but I thought it was cool that we got to see him. It's almost unfortunate now. We were saying that Captain America being post-Cold War, like if this movie had been made a little while ago, we could have had Nick Fury in this movie too, and had it made sense, and have Nick Fury in the Howling Commandos. That would have been cool.
Yeah, that's right. And it just doesn't work now because so much time has passed.
No,
you would have had to have Nick Fury somehow be transported into the future or something.
Yeah, or like in the comics, he has mechanical augmentation and stuff like that.
I kind of thought maybe they would go that direction with this with these movies, and I'm not upset that they didn't. But it might have been interesting, right, if they had like had some kind of technology where like he gets sent to the future or something, and and like nobody really knows about it, and except for him, and so there's all this question about how Nick Fury did so much stuff in the 40s, and then suddenly he's in the present. It's like, how did he do all that? And like only he knows.
I think they might go in that mechanical person route, at least with how they bring back Coulson for the S.H.I.E.L.D. TV show. I have a feeling the one in Avengers was a life model decoy.
I hope that's the case, and that the one in the TV show is not a life model decoy.
That'd be weird, huh?
Wouldn't it?
Robot Coulson.
Hi, I'm Robot Coulson. But I wouldn't put it past Whedon to do Robot Coulson.
I wouldn't either,
and to try to make him the character that we're most invested in, and he's just a robot. That sounds so Whedon.
Yeah,
just wait, it might happen.
Well, I mean, if you're going to do robot...
I love that. Sorry, I gotta say that. I love that line. Don't worry. I've knocked out Hitler over 200 times.
Yeah. A lot of people were speculating that Coulson might become the Vision. And if you do robot Coulson, why not?
I kind of hope I kind of wish they'd go that way.
Yeah.
It sounds almost too cool to be true.
I know, right?
Especially because Whedon has said that show is not going to really have superheroes in it.
Right, true.
I mean, not that they'll never appear or anything necessarily, but
it'll be
I'm really surprised if you went there.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how closely that show ties in with the movie continuity and how it affects things. Like, if you'll have to see... I'm sure they'll make them standalone enough like these movies are, where you won't have to see everything to understand it, but...
Oh, sure, yeah.
That'll be a whole nother planning thing for them, where they're going to have to be making sure an ongoing TV show fits in with the movies that they're making.
Yeah, especially because it's not a prequel. A lot of people assumed it would be.
It'll be interesting. I'm sort of surprised we didn't see a S.H.I.E.L.D. presence in this movie at all. Were you surprised by that?
Not really, only because they're still trying to decide what to call it in Iron Man.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
So, like, S.H.I.E.L.D. doesn't even exist at this point.
That's true.
I mean, you could have done some sort of precursor, but it's so many years before that.
That's true.
I mean, they didn't even have they were coming up with the acronym for it in Iron Man.
That's very true. Yeah.
He's still got that shield. that old school shield. I'm kind of just enjoying sitting here watching this. It's been a while.
Yeah, it's an enjoyable flick. Like, I think all the action works really well, and the character stuff's working really well for me too.
It's not the fastest paced film. They're really taking their time, and what I like about that, though, I'm not complaining. What I like about that is that it feels paced. I don't know if this will make any sense. It almost feels paced a little bit more like a film made in this period, to a degree.
That's a very good point.
Not entirely, but I mean, like, you know, you think about the soundtrack. It's a period kind of soundtrack. Mm-hmm. That sort of, obviously the action is a little more modern, but the way it's paced is just it's a little more slowed down. But it's not about being slow. It's not that in the 40s everything was slow. It's more deliberate.
Yes, exactly. That's the acting in the 40s, especially. Not that the actors in this movie are, like, you know, hamming it up and being deliberate, and not that acting in the 40s was like that, but it was just different. Like you were saying, like, it's a little bit more deliberate, and especially like with the way we had Chris Evans stopping to apologize for walking in front of cars when he's chasing a supervillain in the middle of the street. Like, I don't think we would have seen that happen in a movie where it wasn't a period piece, you know?
Yeah. But and that's also keeping track of what people's sensibilities would be back then, but also that's part of his character.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just thinking of things like in a modern superhero film. I just don't think we'd be having the title character stopping to apologize to people in the middle of an action scene, you know?
No, not generally. It depends on who it is. You might with Superman.
Yeah, that's true. Depending on,
because it's in his character.
Yeah, and the same thing with Cap. But I just think it gives credence to the.
Here we go.
Part of it too.
Here comes the big Red Skull face reveal.
Yes.
I think this is a great place for it. I mean, this is how you want to see Red Skull and Captain America meet for the first time. They're on a bridge. They're over some fire. And I also really like that, you know, Red Skull only knows Captain America so far as this, you know, commercial.
I like that Bucky's there, too.
Yeah, that's important, and I hadn't thought about that before. I always remember this movie as Bucky's barely in it. Mm-hmm. And that he and Captain America didn't really fight together in World War II, but they kind of do.
They kind of do, yeah.
It's just that he has to rescue him. I wish there had been some scenes where, like, they fight together.
Right, exactly. And by the time we end up getting that, Bucky, that's the scene where Bucky falls into the water.
Oh, there it is. And it looks great.
Yes, it does.
And it was worth it.
It was.
I think it was worth it. I love it.
Yeah, I love it too. The makeup couldn't have been any better. They got the nose ridge thing going on, the eyebrow thing. Like, this is straight up Jack Kirby stuff right here.
Yeah, and it's just like Thor, man. They didn't skimp on the comic book. They just came right out and did it. There it is.
It looks fantastic. He's even got the ear hole thing going on.
That was so dramatic. I love how comic book that is. He didn't have to rip his face off.
No, he didn't.
He just did it for dramatic effect. And you want a villain like this to be like that. Again, it's hubris, man. He does a lot of things just because it's big and bombastic.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
We were talking about, you mentioned Skyfall earlier. That's why I love Silva in Skyfall. Because he does that kind of thing, man.
Yeah, he does.
He makes grand entrances, and he likes to play music on loudspeakers before he kills you, and or at least before he blows up your car.
And he'll give long speeches to you about rats before he gets to the point.
Oh, long speeches. That run off on different sorts of tangents. I love Red Skull's car.
Yeah, me too.
I want a toy of that. I wish they'd put that out.
Yeah, I'm sort of surprised that this movie didn't have more toys like that.
Didn't have merchandising, and I that's unfortunate. Avengers, of course, got a lot more merchandising, and we got some cool Cap stuff there. But they did put out some little figures, and they had a pretty extensive line. They had a Winter Soldier figure in that line.
Yeah, I remember the cool thing about the Marvel Studios films, and how much reverence the people making these films have for the source material. They've been putting out comic book series of figures alongside the films that are just straight up figures from the comics, which is cool for people like us. Not that I'm a big fan of the 3 3/4 inch scale figures, but it is cool to get figures of them.
Yeah, I don't like to collect those. They're just too small for me.
Yeah, I agree.
And I do feel like the Marvel Studios films have not given us nearly enough larger figures. We need more 6.5 inches.
I agree.
I'm sounding like a major raving fanboy right now. I do think about things like this some, just because I am a collector, and those are the kinds of figures I like to collect when I get figures.
Yeah, and if you're this excited about a Captain America movie, maybe you want to invest a little bit in.
I will say
merchandising.
Marvel Select, is it Marvel Select or is it? I forget. But the Marvel Direct figures helped out a little bit in that department.
You're talking about the ones that come with bases and stuff. Those are the Marvel Select ones, yeah.
Yeah, I've got the Captain America one from this movie. It's pretty good, and they made a Red Skull, and it's awesome. I don't have it, but it was really good too.
Yeah, I've seen both of those figures in person. They're really nice. I love how Tommy Lee Jones is you can tell that he has some care and reverence for these people, but he's not going to let that get in the way of the war effort. He's got his priorities,
Yeah. Oh yeah, and if they step out of line, it doesn't really matter why they did it.
Yeah, it's that typical he's almost got the same sort of thing that Captain America's got going on, where he gave them the benefit of the doubt, and he thought they failed, and here they are walking back at him.
Well, I think it's important to note that Tommy Lee Jones is doing a great job. He is definitely playing an archetype.
Yeah, he is, and to a degree, so is Chris Evans.
Sure.
I think that's one of the charms of this.
I kind of want that. Yeah, I kind of want that in this particular movie.
Exactly.
And Red Skull is certainly playing an archetype.
Oh yeah.
I mean, Hugo Weaving is playing an archetype. So certainly.
I wonder why I think Hugo Weaving said in interviews that the reason he didn't want to come back was because it wasn't too deep of a role to play or something like that. that he doesn't enjoy playing in films like this where they're just action films and things like that.
But he did 3 Matrix movies.
Yeah, and how can he not have fun playing the Red Skull? I mean, maybe the makeup, but...
It could be one of those things where he just didn't click with a director or something, and he doesn't want to actually say that. But it's weird that he was as vocal about it as he was.
Yeah. I mean, maybe I don't know what the interview that he said that was like. Maybe the reporter was like, asking him about it, and that's just his response to it. I don't know if it was the sort of thing where he was like outwardly like, yeah, like just saying it to people, but.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know what the context was. But,
yeah, exactly.
I mean, whatever. Nothing against Hugo Weaving. I mean, like,
no.
If he didn't like playing it, he didn't like playing it.
Yeah, and he's a fantastic actor.
He also said that he wasn't gonna be pushy if they asked him to come back because he signed a contract. But he also said, if I remember right, that he didn't feel that they would force him.
Right, yeah.
So he made it sound like it wasn't that the people were hard to work for. He just wasn't real impressed with the script.
Right, yeah. And hopefully after he sees, I mean I'm hoping that the second Captain America movie lives up to the greatness of that Winter Soldier arc, because I don't know if you've read the first arc of Brubaker's run with Bucky and him coming.
I really haven't. I need to do that.
Oh, it's great stuff. Maybe we should do a vault on that sometime. That might be fun.
We should.
The movie comes out.
I'll see if I get my hands on that.
I got it in omnibus format. I have the Brubaker omnibus, yeah.
That's great. I love those.
Yeah, they're so awesome. They're like weapons. They're so big.
Dan, you need to get you some Howling Commandos.
I do.
Dan Torrey and his Howling Commandos.
The new comic book from Marvel, now that Nick Fury doesn't do anything with them anymore.
Yeah. It's Dan Torrey. And Dan, why do you have an eye patch? What happened?
It's hereditary.
Okay. My father had an eye patch. His father had an eye patch. We all got eye patches.
I also have to be like a different race, too.
Right.
These guys are really charming, these roles. I like Dum Dum Dugan a lot. Not that he has, a great, big role in the story, but from what I've read of Dum Dum Dugan, I think that this guy plays him pretty well. I've actually heard that those early Nick Fury and the Howling Commandos comics are actually really good, but I've never given them a look or anything.
Yeah, I've sold some of them on eBay, but I've never actually read them.
Oh, nice.
I've sold lots of cool things I should have read first. Captain America runs around in his silly Captain America costume for a surprising amount of time.
Yeah, he does.
He finally puts on. I mean, here obviously he's wearing a real uniform, and I like, by the way, that we get to see him in a real uniform for a while. That's kind of cool.
It is very cool.
But yeah, man, nobody has more wardrobe changes than Chris Evans.
That is very true.
Yeah, it's a good long time before he gets a real uniform, and I like how they kind of talk about it, and there's sort of some question about does he really need a flashy uniform? And
yeah, I'd say there's even like from the soldier's perspective, there's a sort of thing where like, does he even deserve the uniform that he's wearing right now just because he pulled off one mission?
Oh yeah, well he got promoted to captain before he did anything.
Yeah, exactly.
And he's only a full captain because he has to be a captain for them to call him a captain for when he's doing all of his promotional propaganda stuff. Yeah. So it's all politics. Mm-hmm. And suddenly Steve Rogers is swept up in the middle of politics, and that's not what he signed up for.
Right, and
it makes me care about him more. I mean, like I'm more sympathetic toward him because he has very altruistic motivations, and he's being swept up in a organization that's not quite, as altruistic as he is. But then there are people within it that certainly are.
I had never really noticed how they had subtly telegraphed that political direction that they were heading with this character, and that's really interesting.
And then you get into Avengers, and you have that whole thing with them building the Tesseract and all that.
Oh yeah,
or with them trying to get their hands on it.
And I kind of hope we get that story adapted, because one of the stories that I always really liked about Cap was the one where he quits being Captain America, and they have that whole thing where they bring that other guy in to be or he becomes the U.S. agent or something. I haven't read the story, but I've wanted to read it for a while, and the idea of like Cap not wanting to play ball with the government and not wanting to be their puppet and quitting when they try to make him do something that he doesn't want to do.
Yeah, where they're just out for their own interests, and
right, exactly.
It's not they're not putting their ethics first, like he would.
Yeah, exactly. Putting the American ideals first. It's almost like he's making a statement, like, you know, you've lost sight of what this country is supposed to stand for.
Well, and keep in mind that again, I feel like it all goes back to this. The first big character thing that we get for Steve Rogers is that he's always going to sacrifice himself to save somebody else, no matter who it is.
Oh yeah, exactly.
And if the government doesn't work that way, he doesn't want to work for them.
Mm-hmm.
So if it's all about them and they're stepping on people, he's not going to stand for that.
Yeah, and I really hope he gets that sort of story in
another
American film adapted, because that would be a great story to adapt, especially contemporarily, you know.
Oh, absolutely, sure. And that's a story that, you know, that's an idea that never really gets old. It never stops being relevant.
Right, exactly. Because there's always that sort of question.
As long as there is corruption in government, that will always be something that's worth talking about.
Exactly.
And as long as there are governments, there will be some level of corruption.
Yeah, it's unavoidable.
Yeah, it's unavoidable. So it's.
And that's the refreshing thing about Steve Rogers as a fictional character. Like, it's the fantasy of, you know, the incorruptible man. Oh, the uncorruptible man, I mean. I like the idea that all the metal, the vibranium in the world was put into that shield, and that's the only one.
Yeah.
Because, like, in the comics, I think vibranium had been used in other places, and, like, you have adamantium, too. Which is, like, I don't know what the specifics are, but, like, I think vibranium is stronger because it's adamantium combined with something else.
You know, maybe they don't really talk about the costume, because just suddenly he's wearing it, and now we're in the middle of a montage. I forgot about that. All right, well, I'm making stuff up, apparently. When they start doing that montage, and they have a little bit of slow motion when he's hitting people with the shield, it looks amazing, and it's really fun to watch. But I gotta tell you, it's hard for me not to just like suddenly imagine like a TV show intro. Where he's got like he's got like his own theme song, and then you see him and then you see him look over at like Dum Dum Dugan or something, and he says, "I love it when a plan comes together."
That beginning of the montage where he's like hitting people, you could have been like, you know, freeze frame it. You know, Chris Evans is Captain America. Hugo Weaving as the Red Skull as he drives up.
Yeah, as he's pulling up in his car. Now I want to go in and just take this montage and turn it into a TV show intro.
Shades at night. Get to work.
Do it, Shades. You know you want to. But he's got to use the A-Team music.
Yeah, he'll make it way more funny than we're describing it as being.
Yeah, it's got to be the A-Team. Ba ba da ba ba bum bum. Ba 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 bum. And which is really funny because I mean that's an 80s show, but it would totally fit.
See, that actually made me think of something.
And then when he throws the shield at the screen, that would be like the end of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Of the intro. Like, you could totally just take this montage. Anyway.
You know how Hannibal smokes cigars in the A-Team?
Yeah.
I find it interesting, from what I can remember, that we haven't seen anyone in World War II smoking.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. That's one thing that they seem to take out a lot these days, no matter if it's period piece or what it is, man. That people aren't smoking.
Well, like,
because we're worried about like encouraging that or something. But I really feel like, you know, for the sake of authenticity, like people were smoking a lot at this time.
oh yeah, like we
should see some of that.
A lot of the army regiments were named after cigarettes. And I think the reason why Marvel doesn't have smoking in it anymore, because this was the reason it happened in the comics, was Joe Quesada's father passed away because of lung cancer and smoking, and he didn't want that to be in the comics because he didn't want to encourage people. So that's why, like, you know, the Thing and Wolverine don't smoke anymore in the comics. So him being the chief creative officer of Marvel, that's probably why. Because I know he has a hand in all the film dealings too.
Well, I'm not going to necessarily begrudge him that.
Right.
I understand that. At the same time, I just feel like you can make a case for doing it at certain points, and that it's not necessarily glorifying it.
Right, exactly, and especially if we're making a period piece here, like
we got a period piece where people don't know that it's any kind of a health hazard.
Right, exactly.
They don't think about it like that. I mean, I've been watching Mad Men lately. I mean, in the early '60s, they didn't know until finally there were some studies published.
Oh yeah, everybody was smoking cigarettes in the '60s too, like chain smoking. Like, isn't it weird that Dum Dum Dugan isn't smoking a cigar right now?
Yeah, you know, now that you mention it, it kind of bugs me. It kind of takes you out a little bit. Well, it's just he would be. Well, you know, we've got alcohol in this movie. Why don't we have smoking?
Yeah. And I mean, you can make arguments as to, you know, which one's worse for you too.
Sure.
And see, this is the scene we were talking about that we wish had been more of the movie where Bucky and Cap are fighting together.
Yeah, especially because when we finally get it, now he's going to get killed.
Yeah. Or so we think.
Yeah. Presumably.
And this is the first time we see Bucky ever really do anything like all that heroic too, except for saving Steve from the fight at the beginning, obviously, but like on the scale of, like, you know, being a soldier and all that.
Yeah, that's definitely a criticism I would give it. I don't feel like Bucky is as much in the forefront in this movie as he should have been, because I feel like your average Joe watching the movie that doesn't know anything about comic books wouldn't even really get that Bucky is supposed to be a major character until he dies.
Yeah, and I feel like it's even to the point where when he shows up in the second movie, are people gonna, you know, realize that he's that guy? You know what I'm saying?
Very
they do flashbacks.
Because, like, now, have they cast the same actor?
Yes, they have.
Oh, that's great. I do love his costume here, though.
I do too.
I mean, I'm glad he looks like he does, and I don't think we needed the mask or anything.
No, I don't think so either, because, you know, he always went by his civilian name anyway, so it's not like he needed a secret identity.
Nah, he just wore a mask because
superhero sidekicks did.
Yep, a mask. Dan, if I could get away with it, I would wear a mask all the time. And a cape.
Me too.
Not really, though. Well, maybe a cape.
Yeah, maybe sometimes.
maybe every now and again. Maybe this conversation's gotten too personal, Dan. I don't know, man. I don't know if I should go any further.
Fridays.
I'm just kidding. Just on Fridays. Only when I'm driving. My Catmobile.
The Catmobile.
I need a Catmobile, Dan.
You should totally get one. What would the symbol on it be?
I don't know.
You'd have to come up with a cap symbol.
With a cap symbol. Yeah. I thought about putting together a Geekvolution mobile.
That's awesome. I kind of forgot how how much Aram Zola is actually in this movie.
Yeah, he's all over it. Oh man, I want steak now, Dan. At this point, looking at this, like I would be happy to go into that interrogation room right now just to eat that steak.
Yeah, I feel like this Tommy Lee Jones character is really paralleling with Steve Rogers a whole lot. Where you have him like walking into a room to interrogate a guy with like a plate of steak, you know? He's like being accommodating to him and stuff. Like I feel like they're kind of trying to set him up as like Steve Rogers if he was an old guy, a little bit.
No, sort of, but keep in mind he's actually being a little bit sadistic here because this guy's a vegetarian.
Oh yeah, that's true. I forgot.
So, yeah, I don't know if you're right about that. His whole thing is,
maybe
I brought my dinner in here, and I'm going to be a jerk face and eat it in front of this guy to intimidate him.
That's funny that they're talking about his stomach through this whole scene. And he's eventually going to have his face there.
Oh, that's funny. You might be reading into that, or you might not be reading into that.
They've mentioned it like 4 times.
Okay.
I don't know.
I'm gonna move more toward you're not reading into that. I love it when he says that would be awkward. Wow, now I really hope he ends up with his face in his stomach.
Me too.
There's a sentence I never thought I'd say. Out of context, that just sounds ridiculous. Dude, I really hope that guy ends up with his face in his stomach.
He's an interesting guy here physique-wise, too, because he's like scrawny and little and unintimidating like Steve Rogers was before he got his Captain America transformation.
Yeah, that's a good point, and how those two people lead totally different lives.
Yeah. And Remender's playing a lot with the parallels between the two of them in that whole Dimension Z thing that's going on in the comics right now. It's pretty good. Going back to both of their pasts.
It's a smart choice to give him that kind of high-pitched voice.
I agree, yeah.
That's what I would imagine him having in the comics.
He's such a nutty villain. I can't believe, before I was reading Captain America under Remender's run, like, I knew Aram Zola, but I wasn't, like, I had seen him show up a few times, but I wasn't, like, wholly familiar enough to, like, pick up on this when they were telegraphing it so hard in the movie.
Red Skull, you were one of the only people I can think of that can get away with having wine under your airplane.
I love the Hail Hydra salute and everything. It's so awesome and over the top.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome.
This guy is scary. You really buy that this guy is, like, scarier than Hitler. Like, he's got broader ambitions and, like, that.
Well, and so far as the ambitions are succeeding, that's the scary part.
Yeah.
I mean, he just gave, like, 1,000 guys energy weapons.
Yeah. This is the scene that I was talking about with the alcohol in Steve.
Yeah, they do talk about it. There it is. Yeah, I forgot all about that. Well, I'm glad they did that.
Yeah.
And I mean that's really cool for him because he's got to figure out how to keep his humanity and everything that keeps him unique, like I said earlier, while being so kind of alien now.
Yeah, and a lot of people choose to deal with, times of loss like that through alcohol, and he has to be strong enough, not just physically, like you were saying, emotionally to deal with this.
Yeah, he's going to be expected to handle things that other people would not be expected to be able to handle because of what he's been given.
Right.
And it's important that he's been given it. He signed up for this.
It's unfortunate that we can't have Captain America and Wolverine sit down in a bar and not get drunk together.
There's a lot of things like that that's kind of unfortunate. Characters you'd like to see put together, and this whole business of everybody that owns Marvel's got to have their own separate Marvel Universe thing now is kind of bugging me, because it just feels weird. And then you've got to keep track of which ones have which characters in different continuities.
I agree. I mean, like, we're doing a period piece in World War II, and X-Men Origins Wolverine, they showed Wolverine fighting in World War II. How cool would it have been, like, they did an X-Men Evolution where, like, how they did an X-Men Evolution was Captain America and Wolverine liberated the camp that Magneto was in when he was a kid.
Oh, they did that? That's pretty cool.
Yeah, like, how cool would that have been?
Yeah, there's an episode about them together in World War II in the 90s cartoon also.
Oh, is there? Okay.
And it's decent, yeah. They don't do anything quite that cool, but it's decent.
That's awesome.
So, how do you feel about just kind of the way they did the costume in this, and how they decided not to go with the actual physical wings on the side of the helmet?
I'm fine with it. I mean, I think they could have done the wings based on everything else that they've already done in this universe and in this book.
I don't think it would have been too hokey. And then they sort of finally did them in Avengers.
Yeah, I mean, they weren't, like, protruding off the side of his head or anything, but...
No, but they weren't just... If I remember right, they weren't just painted on. Or were they just painted on in that, too?
They looked painted on to me, but...
Oh, okay, maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe I'm making things up, Dan.
These motorcycles are awesome.
I can't look at this scene and not think of Return of the Jedi.
Yeah, I was just going to say the same thing.
Ha, beat you to it. Like, even the locale looks kind of the same.
Yeah, and you know...
They go up into a military base.
And he's taking them out in sort of similar ways, too.
Yeah.
With the zip line and stuff. Oh, did they just do the scream?
Yeah.
They do that with the Scout Troopers, too, from if I remember correctly, in one of those deaths. I mean, that scream is in Jedi at the beginning, too, with the Sarlacc pit. One of the random aliens gets thrown off.
Some people have complained that Captain America kind of comes right out and kills people in this, and I like to remind folks that he is a soldier in a war.
Yeah, exactly.
And I don't feel like it's crazy blatant most of the time. I think there are a couple deaths later on top of the jet or the big flying vehicle. I can't remember what exactly it is that some people complained about. Mm-hmm. But I forget what that was now. I guess we'll talk about it when we get there.
I mean, Captain America is not a character I've ever thought about, like, not killing people all the time. Like, obviously he has an affinity for human life, and he's not going to kill people for no reason. But if it comes down to, like, you know, the world gets conquered by Red Skull or he has to kill a few people, then he's going to kill people. Because it's his duty. He's doing what he has to do. I like that the Red Skull, even though he claims to be, you know, above Hitler and stuff, he's still like riding on his ideology and stuff there, where he's talking about, you know, how arrogance is an American trait, and, you know, how the Germans, or the people that he hails from, are so much superior.
Oh yeah, yeah, and he's definitely got some hypocrisy going on. Of course, Hitler was all hypocrisy. Yeah, completely. And what's interesting. What's interesting about all that is that Red Skull believes in everything Hitler did, but he just goes a lot further with it. Mm. So it's almost like he sees himself as a superior Hitler. Like it isn't that his goals are different; it's that he's just better at it.
Yeah, he thinks
he is
too small.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think you know the idea of the superior man and like genetic engineering, creating the superior man, all that crazy experimentation. We've got that going on right now in Uncanny Avengers with Red Skull.
Yeah, exactly. And I thought it was always a really interesting choice to have Captain America be a blonde-haired and blue-eyed guy, and he's fighting against the regime that sort of, coined that whole Aryan thing.
Yeah, great point. Especially because so many of the people that bought into that didn't look that way.
Right, yeah. I mean, I remember...
And it's fun that, Red Skull kind of buys into that, but he's got Red Skull for a face.
Yeah, and even when he puts that mask on, it's not like he's trying to look like that either, which is interesting.
But again, he's above that.
Yeah, that's true.
He gets to the point where he thinks he's at the very top, and he kind of, I imagine he would want to look different from everyone else because no one else can match him.
That's true.
No one else can get to that. So he's the ideal face. It's sort of like this is going to be maybe kind of an odd thing to reference, but it's kind of like the Master in Buffy, where you've got this vampire that's at like the peak of vampirism, and he looks different from everybody else because he's lived so long, and so he's at like all the other vampires just like look like humans with like kind of wrinkles on their faces and some teeth, but like he is totally different looking and crazy because he's been alive for so long. He's like, that's why he's at the top, because he's the peak vampire, and Red Skull's kind of got that. Except that he looks this way because of an experiment gone wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think that again, it's this really interesting kind of hypocrisy.
It is. It identifies a lot of the flaws in, that sort of philosophy. I mean, we didn't need this movie to point them out for us, obviously, but it's interesting that they.
No, that's what we're here for. Do you think
it's interesting that they kept all that in mind, and like we had said before, a lot of people, they don't shy away from the Nazi thing at all, and like it's not offensively in your face about it either. Like it's. I think they struck a good balance with it, where it's not like we're making the Nazis out to be like these, because this very easily could have been like the stereotypical 40s Nazi villain film where the Nazis are just complete and utterly like downright evil, and not that Red Skull isn't evil here completely, but like they could have made much more bones about the fact that how evil they were, and made them out to look like complete and utter dirty, despicable people, and like they just sort of like have them do evil things, and have the audience left up to decide whether or not they think they're completely and utterly black to the core.
I'm not sure this is a love story that really has the time it needs to flourish.
Yeah, it sort of has the Thor thing where I think the actors are doing more for it than the script is. I think Chris Evans and the actress who played Peggy have great chemistry together.
Yeah, I think they do too. This movie has too much work to do to be able to really have a proper love story. But they also don't force it as hard as I felt like Thor did, where Thor comes off by the end like it is a love story movie, and this isn't that. It's just a part of it.
No, it definitely not. And I think this movie does a good job of being that period piece World War II movie where you have the hero like getting the girl at the end, but like you don't feel like she's a damsel in distress, or like she,
No, that was Bucky.
Yeah, that's true.
So how much do you love that one of the missiles says New York on it?
That is very cool.
I think that's hilarious. Just because, again, Red Skull's so over the top. He does things like that. Captain America made the mistake of saying he's from Brooklyn. And so Red Skull's like, well, the first thing I'm gonna blow up is Brooklyn. I love that.
I do like that quite a bit.
I don't know if that's really the first thing he was gonna blow up, but I think it's funny.
Even if it wasn't, the first thing that he was gonna blow up, it should be.
This is that scene people kind of complain about, that he's just throwing people out of the airplane.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what else would he have done? I mean, like,
right. It's either like throw those guys out of the airplane or like let this crazy maniac destroy every major city on the East Coast.
Yeah.
And let all those people die.
I just don't think you can expect Captain America to be a complete pacifist given that he's a soldier in a war.
Right. I mean, we saw him earlier, like, you know, taking guys out with a tripwire, you know, going pretty fast on motorcycles. That, you know, if it didn't kill them, it would injure them pretty severely.
Yeah, that's right.
Guns.
I don't feel like it's like super violent or anything.
No. He's not like meticulously murdering people like a serial killer.
And I don't think we see him shoot anybody, do we?
I mean, we see him firing bullets, but there's no, like, you know, him capping people.
Well, that's what I mean. He's not walking around just, like, blowing people away. We're not going to get the Captain America first-person shooter or anything. Would that be a great game?
Oh, man.
Captain America just goes around, and if you don't have any bullets, you can throw your shield.
It'd be the easiest game, because all you have to do is just walk around with your shield up the whole time, and no one will be able to hit you.
No one's going to hit you. You're like, this game's too easy.
Oh, the action scenes in this movie are great. I love when he just throws a guy out of the little jet there and hops in.
I also really like that Captain America's shield has, like, scratch marks on it.
Yeah, I like that too.
Because the first time I saw this, I remember at first thinking, oh, well, that's with that material, it wouldn't scratch up. Well, yeah, the paint would.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not actually messing up the metal, but the paint's chipping off of it.
Yeah, exactly. I love that the last action sequence of this film is sort of a dogfight too.
Yeah, I like that one too.
Because World War II, that was sort of the first big war where airplanes were a major presence in warfare, you know? Like in World War I, they were like, dogfights were like pilots opening their cockpits and shoot pistols at each other in the air.
I like that this is one of those movies that does center around an artifact, but not in a really contrived, irritating way.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
Movie, everybody's after the Tesseract, and that replaces any character development. No, I mean, I'm not sure Captain America is even aware of the Tesseract. Red Skull uses it to power his stuff, and I don't think they really understand the gravity of the situation exactly.
Oh no, definitely not.
Till they get to it. It's fun to see a character like this that is doing his very best, and he would be really ignorant about what exactly he was up against.
And that's very typical of what a soldier is. And that's why it works so well for this character. Because most of the time, like, if you're a soldier, you don't know the larger implications of what your government's trying to do when they send you to do something, right? You just hope that they're being as altruistic as you want to be.
Red Skull has this great line right there that I forgot about where he says, "I have seen the future, there are no flags." And Captain America says, not my future. And again, he will go to the future, and yeah, there are still flags, but he's not going to be fighting nations anymore.
Right, yeah.
I think that's really interesting.
It is really interesting. It'll be interesting to see. I hope that they deal a little bit more with all of that stuff in the second Captain America film, because I feel like in Avengers we got a little bit of it, but I would have liked to go a little deeper, you know?
Well, remember that Whedon had a lot of that stuff in his script, and they cut a lot of it out and put it in Winter Soldier.
Oh, they did? Okay, good. That's good.
Yeah, he had a bunch more Captain America stuff in that movie, and there just wasn't enough time for it.
I knew that there was a scene with him and that waitress lady that talks about, you know, how Captain America saved her life at the end of the film, and I've seen that deleted scene, but I didn't realize there were that many other scenes in there. That's cool.
Well, there was just stuff that was in the script that they cut out that they never filmed, then they put in Winter Soldier.
Yeah, and did you catch the little image of Asgard there when he picked up the cube?
Yeah, it's cool.
It's cool.
Yeah, it's surprising how much Thor is in this movie.
Very really cool, especially like you said that they came out the same summer. I didn't really pick up on as much as I did this viewing, as I did the first time, and he just got transported to somewhere in the Nine Worlds. You don't know where, but...
Oh, that's a good point. See, I always thought he was, like, inside the cube, but you're right. He's probably, like, up someplace.
It'll be interesting to see if he eventually comes back, which world he got transported to. Because, like, I would imagine if Red Skull gets transported to a world that has a meek civilization, he would try to dominate them and take over. How interesting would it be if, like, you know, when we see Red Skull again, he's, like, you know, got his own civilization going on.
That's just what he would do, too.
Yeah.
He's got his whole, like, Hydra place.
He's just, like, you know, the king of the Frost Giants or something. Not that he'd be able to ever, like, dominate the Frost Giants, but...
Now, a lot of people have complained about this ending and that Captain America didn't really have to crash this in the water.
Yeah, I've heard that as a common thing, too.
It's not something I thought about in the theater.
No, I didn't either. But, I mean, I think it would have been just as easy to just have him fall out of the plane and into the water, right?
Yeah, I think so, too.
Because that's, I mean, granted, Incredible Hulk doesn't count. But in one of the scenes of Incredible, I think, no, actually, maybe it's not even in the theatrical cut of the film. Maybe it's a deleted scene. So it doubly doesn't count.
It's not even canon now.
But there's a scene where the Hulk is in you know, the North Pole, and you see Cap's shield in the ice. Like on the frozen water, not in a plane. So, they probably intended to do something more similar to the comics, where he just falls off of a missile and falls into the water. But
yeah, I felt like they did this just because it would seem more dramatic. But I'm
Yeah.
not sure the premise is quite set up right.
I mean, they had the missiles right there in the ship. Red Skull could have got one of them off. You know, maybe the New York one, and then Cap goes on to disable it and falls into the water, like similar to how we did in the comics. I think that would have worked fine.
Are you tired, Dad?
I'm very tired, I'm sorry.
That looks
I have to
cool.
say this is a touching scene when you see all of them reacting to the fact that they're not...
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to say, that actually looks really good.
Yeah. Especially Tommy Lee Jones' reaction to it. Like, he's sort of been cold and distant with everyone throughout the whole film. And to see him especially react to it like that, it gets you.
Gets you right there.
Right in the heart.
And of course, Howard Stark is going to find the Tesseract because he has technology no one else has.
So Howard Stark, if he finds that, then would that somehow contribute to Tony's development of the Iron Man costume too?
Only if he actually used it. But I mean, I would assume that he did. I don't know. Maybe.
That'd be really interesting if all three of them were connected by that artifact that they end up having to, stop Loki from getting in the Avengers. That's kind of cool.
Yeah. Well, they already, even if he didn't use it, I mean, they already are, just because Howard Stark is in this film. And
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Very, very cool that they got a guy that looks so much like Howard Hughes to play Howard Stark and be Tony's father, because obviously one of the main inspirations for Tony Stark's character was Howard Hughes.
Yeah, that was really smart. And there are a couple places in that movie where I have to kind of blink twice because I think I see Robert Downey. I mean, like, he looked kind of close to him.
Yeah, he did, for sure.
You could really see him being the guy's dad.
Yeah.
I think what S.H.I.E.L.D. does to Steve Rogers here is really sorry. And I thought it was kind of cool that they went this far.
Yeah.
Because this tells Steve everything he needs to know about how manipulative these people can be.
Mm-hmm.
Like this is not going to be a good first impression. Because remember, he's all about the truth. He doesn't like manipulative stuff. He doesn't care. If it makes any kind of sense, he's not an ends justifies the means guy whatsoever. He's extremely the opposite direction.
Yeah, if you notice, like, just visually in this scene, all of the shield people, the deceptive people, people that operate in the shadows are all dressed in black, and he's dressed in bright white and chooses to wear the colors of the flag on his shoulders. Nice visual motif, I think.
This is one of those things where as soon as he woke up, I mean, I knew where they were going to go with this. It's predictable, but not in a bad way.
Right. I love the final line of the film, too. I had a date. It's great stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And the credit sequence for this film,
that.
I think, is the best of all the Marvel Studios ones. Where you got all these American World War II propaganda things.
Yeah.
Very, very cool.
Yeah, and it was such a good choice to have him run right out into Times Square and have to take all this in at one time.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Now, Stan Lee's always an executive producer on these movies. How involved do you think he is with this stuff?
I don't think he's very involved at all.
I don't think so either. Of course, a lot of people were upset that there was no credit at all to Jack Kirby in the Avengers credits for that film. I'd be interested to see
I didn't know that.
If they have it in here at all.
Yeah, that's not right. I didn't know that. I wonder why they did that.
I mean, I don't know.
Huh.
Maybe they gave him a creator credit, but I remember there was something to do with his family being upset with how that was handled.
Man, that's just a sad way to end a movie, man.
Yeah, it is.
And then it's like, dun 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 dun!
I know, I love looking at all these classic American
This movie was sad, but dun 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 dun!
I'm such a history nerd, so like seeing all these propaganda images is so cool to me.
Oh.
Because I recognize so many of them.
Yeah, me too. Well, that was fun, Dan.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I enjoyed watching that, I have to say. It was a fun movie.
Yeah, it's just a really solid movie. It's not the most complex and deepest of these, certainly.
No, definitely not. But I don't think it has to be. Especially, like we said, given the period piece nature of it. Captain America, as a thing, isn't really conducive to doing like deep character work with him in his origin. I would say.
Not generally. But I would have to say I think I like this movie a smidge more than Thor.
Yeah.
And I think that it's visually there's more going on with it than in Thor.
Yeah, I could see how you would say that, especially since, like, Captain America has the whole period world thing going on for the entire film, whereas the interesting visual aspects of Thor and Asgard and we're not there the whole movie.
Yeah, and so much of that is computer generated.
Yeah, for sure.
Of what works there. I mean, not to say that there's not plenty of computer generated in this too, just because you've got to fill in all that
practical.
You have to fill in all that background. But I think this movie does a really good job of integrating its visual effects. There are certainly some places where I go, okay, that's CG, and it takes me out a little bit. But most of those are things that I don't know how else you would have done them. Right. It's not relying too heavily on CG, and I think overall the Marvel Studios films have done a really good job with that.
I agree.
And that's something I look out for a lot because I don't like gratuitous CGI. It bothers me.
Yeah, exactly.
If you can do it physically, you should do it physically.
Yeah, I agree. I don't. Yeah, I'm not a fan of, obviously, gratuitous CGI. I'm a Star Wars fan. I'm not a fan of that.
Well, fair enough, Dan.
I like the practical effects. They look very good, especially, they hold up a lot better. Like, you go look at a movie like Empire Strikes Back, that movie looks fantastic still today. Whereas, look at Phantom Menace, it looks like, it looked dated like a year after it was made.
Yeah, that's right. I really love that when we get to the straight up, black credits that they brought back the song from the propaganda scene.
Oh yeah, very cool stuff.
They did a great job on that song.
Yeah, and it's good that they didn't go with like some generic rock song to play it up like they do with a lot of movies.
I think it's also really cool that they didn't try to find some old song that would have sort of fit this, but not really. They actually wrote something for this.
Mm-hmm.
I'm
actually sort of surprised we didn't get more period music in the movie. Now that you say that,
no, you're right about that. That's interesting. They went with a really traditional orchestral score.
Yeah,
and it works.
I think Alan Silvestri did the score for this movie, and he's, if I'm not mistaken, the guy that did Avengers as well, right?
I think so. I just thought that they kind of scored it like you would score a period World War II piece. I mean, yeah, definitely. And so there's not a lot. A lot of World War II epics don't have actually a lot of period music. Like maybe in a couple places, if somebody's in a car or something, they might play something.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
In their house, listening to the radio. So yeah, you're right. They didn't do a lot of that, but at the same time, I'm glad that they didn't do a lot of popular music instead of score.
Oh yeah, definitely. It would have been weird to have I don't know, a 40s I don't know what to do. I don't know any of the top of my head, but what I'm talking about, one of those 40s, pop songs playing over an action scene or something.
Yeah, I mean, they went that direction in Watchmen, and it worked for the most part. But you're kind of taking a big risk doing that.
Yeah, and with Watchmen, the music that they selected, especially with the opening montage with the Times Era changing, that's music that addressed a lot of the issues that Watchmen was talking about, whereas 40s music, it's not really about heavy hitting social issues and things,
No, a whole lot of it's just going to be kind of fun about music. War or fun music, yeah.
I mean, I think we did get a good wartime propaganda song with what they were, we were discussing that song that his cheerleaders of sorts were chanting when he was selling the war bonds earlier.
Yeah, but like I said, it's cool that they wrote that.
Yeah, exactly.
It's going to be interesting to see what a Captain America movie is going to be like set mostly in present day.
It will be interesting.
Because I can't really think of any time I've ever seen that. I can't think of any other occasion for it, right? Where you have a movie and then its sequel is set so many years after the first one, but your protagonist is the same age.
Yeah, that's very true.
That doesn't happen.
I can't think of a movie that does that.
Now,
where
we're going to get 18 comments where somebody thinks of a great example, but I can't think of one right now.
I mean, they've done movies obviously things like Back to the Future, where he goes into the future and then comes back at the end, but Captain America's stuck there.
Yeah, it's a little bit different. And of course, to be fair, it's not like it'll be super jarring, because this movie is, well, we've had Avengers, but this movie is bookended with present day. It's not like we never go there. But the bulk of it is set in the past, so I'm sure it'll be challenging in like, what kind of tone do you set, it won't be the same tone.
Oh, no, definitely not. I think it's going to be a lot darker.
Oh, yeah. It'll have to be. Just from what little I know about that story, it'll have to be.
Yeah, and that'll reflect the political climate of the time, present day, as opposed to, what it was like back then. Not that World War II wasn't a terrible experience for the people that were involved, but
yeah, of course, that's an understatement, sure.
But just like, we were talking about the look of the film and how optimistic Steve Rogers was about the time, and that was reflected from his perspective. But like, you take him into this time, it's just it's going to be such a stark contrast in how murky things have become, especially post Cold War, with all the espionage. And you were talking about how like Steve Rogers likes to do things out in the open. That was sort of what he was meant to do since the beginning, is be a figurehead and go and fight out in the open and be honest about things. And now everything's done in the shadows and it's all dirty. And
I think as time goes on, it gets more and more interesting to see how much Captain America has to catch up.
Yeah, exactly.
Because imagine even the difference between Captain America, say a Captain America that was pulled out of the ice pre 9/11 versus one that was pulled out post 9/11.
Oh yeah, definitely.
How different is that? Forget just Cold War. Like how different is the world after that happens?
Yeah, very true.
So I don't know. I find that kind of thing fascinating. I mean,
yeah,
I feel like a Captain America that gets pulled out like during Korea or Vietnam isn't going to have anything like as hard of a time as he is if he's pulled out 30, 40 years after that.
Yeah,
I almost forgot about our after credit scene.
Oh yeah.
Which is interesting, of course, because this scene's actually in Avengers.
Yes, it is.
And I think that's the first time they've done that, isn't it?
I think it is, yeah.
Where they actually showed us a scene from another movie.
A lot of people are speculating that we might get that with Iron Man 3 with Tony because they did show pictures of a space suit in Iron Man 3, and a lot of people are speculating that he's going to...
Oh, you know what? Now that I'm thinking about it, though, now that we're looking at this, that actually wasn't an after-credits scene. That's actually just setting up a teaser for Avengers.
Oh, yeah, that's what it was. It was a trailer,
I forgot all about that. Yeah, it's actually a trailer.
Yeah, but a lot of people are speculating that Tony's going to go meet the Guardians of the Galaxy in the post-credits sequence of Iron Man 3.
I hope they do that. I hope they do that.
That would be very cool, wouldn't it?
Now I want to watch Avengers.
Me too.
Oh, man. That was fun, Dan.
It was. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Oh, always, dude. And everybody, thanks a lot for listening to Geeks Not Nerds, the podcast. Hopefully Eric and I will be with you pretty soon for Iron Man. I'm not sure when exactly that's going to happen, but we still have a couple more Marvel Studios films to do before we finally get to Avengers. And Dan, I hope we'll come up with some more films to do really soon.
Oh, yeah, definitely. We'll think of something.
Thanks again, everybody. I'm Captain Logan.
And I'm Dan.
And we'll see you later.